Okay, hello, lovely people. So tonight I am meeting with my lovely friend Essie, and we thought Essie's been through quite a journey, and actually, of all the podcasts I've done, Essie's have been by far the most listened to. And we just feel that because home educating is such a journey, ever changing, it's really great to capture people's experiences along the journey, so that other people going through homeschooling can recognize that it is a kind of real flow of working with your children, working with your family, working with life, and how things change. So welcome, Essie.
Oh, thank you. So lovely to be chatting again with you. Well, we never stop chatting, but chatting on this space.
Yeah, no, we don't, do we? We so last time we were recording our chat, we were talking about so your experiences. You kind of started the homeschooling like as an unschooler, and then you kind of shifted into radical unschooling, and then your journey's kind of shifted from that point. Do you want to sort of pick up from maybe that's where you were and what happened next?
Yeah, it's made me think I'd love to listen to that podcast actually and see where we were, because it's so interesting, isn't it? How I think you open yourselves up to home educating, and you just begin this lifelong kind of experience of learning and growing and evolving and changing and transforming and reviewing and just working it all out. And I guess there's not a well, it reminds me of what my daughter says about God, actually, that God's too big to fit into church or any one type of religion. And I think it's the same as like individual family wisdom. It's too unique a kind of a dynamic and collection of different things to fit into or under one sort of name. And I think for us, those unschooling was so useful because it kind of gave us this sort of framework to kind of, well, really sort of rub up against and kind of sand down the edges and allow us to kind of go, ooh, and challenge us and allow us to really grow. And then it was like, I think radical unschooling was just like, for us as people, it was like, yeah, we really want to keep diving deep, keep kind of having a look. There's more here. And again, it just gave us this beautiful kind of philosophy to kind of really dive deeply into, take what we needed. And then we got to a point where we were like, ooh, sort of kind of hit a little wall with it, I think. I'm trying to remember now because I feel like it was like maybe, like a couple of years ago. But I definitely remember feeling like, yeah, okay, I feel like there's more. And throughout our journey, I think, or maybe it was for about the last 4 years, I'd been following Lucy Atkin-Reid on Instagram, recommended to me by a friend of hers. And I just loved her. I love New Zealand. So there was that instant kind of like attraction anyway. And I've always wanted to live in a yurt. So I was like, oh my God. And then she's just the most beautiful, loving, open sort of person who is doing the work herself. So she's not like preaching from some kind of pulpit, but she's like, oh, it's hard. And she's just sharing all the things that are kind of, she's kind of unraveled as she's gone along. And so I always loved following her. I found it really inspiring and kind of really, I felt like what I got from her was a real sense of community, actually, which is something that I really longed for myself, but also for my family, sort of around aligned values. And I found with radical unschooling, it was like we were, we live in Cornwall, it's rural, the population is small anyway, and the amount of homeschooling people is smaller. And then you're like radical unschooling, you're in a pool of like one. And so it's not like we wanted to not be radical unschoolers because of that. But I think there was a whole bunch of stuff going on. And as I listened to her, I just felt like a real sort of softening and an opening. And I think she started to talk about, well, actually, no, she offered like a community, a space basically for families that wanted to grow and learn and evolve together online. And I was just like, oh, sure about this, because we're not just starting out on the unschooling journey. But I was just very, very attracted to her and everything she said. So I joined up, and it's literally the best thing I think I've done, actually. Probably top 5 best things I've ever done, really. Maybe probably top, I would say, maybe top 2, because I feel like everything that she talks about is so aligned with our values as people and as a family. But she's given us such beautiful tools that are not rigid, but allow us to be able to sort of, what she talks about is having a life that orientates around joy. And I love that, because I'm like, well, that's an aspiration to totally work towards. You know, if our homeschooling life, you know, is orient the right word? Like, you know, yeah, orients towards joy or moves around this idea of joy and saying yes as much as we can and expressing ourselves, then that's a really good thing. And so I think that allowed us to go, no labels, thank you. That's just limiting us. And we're just going to now, with all this juicy, beautiful wisdom we've gained over the last sort of 4 years, we can just now be ourselves really confidently. And here's some beautiful, reflective community and rituals and joyful kind of ways to express ourselves as a family. So yes, I feel like that's what kind of moved us to this sort of place, really.
And we'll put all her links on the, because I've been part of her course and it's absolutely fantastic. And she does, I love that whole notion of no label and just, you kind of, I think whatever you're doing or whatever works for you kind of fits into her kind of ethos. And it's really about finding yourself, isn't it? And you know, the living life by joy, crikey, we spend so much time like in worry and fear and you know, and actually all we are doing is just our days are going by and we're not enjoying or living our best life, are we?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think the thing that's radically changed our life, actually, I think there was a session that, you know, because we meet sort of every month and we do these sessions as community, whoever can kind of come together. And it's really nice because it's a global thing. So you've got people from all around the world, which is beautiful. She was talking about joy, but she was talking about this sort of idea of like, actually, you know, as parents and particularly homeschooling parents who've just got so much heart for their children, they're so focused on their kids and they so just want the world for their children, and they've basically, you know, aligned everything and moved everything around so that, you know, this works for their children. That often, and we're so focused on the joy of our children that we completely neglect our own needs and our own joy, and that actually we're trying to fill their cups from an empty teapot.
Yeah, totally.
And, you know, if we think of ourselves as a sort of this teapot who's got needs that we need to fill up first, then I think at that point, I couldn't even identify what my own needs were. You know, that's how off the table it was for me. I was so focused on their needs and I just thought it was all about meeting their needs. And so I got this like inner, you know, it sort of like dropped into my consciousness and just spread through my body, and it was just like resonated as just like a whole body, yes. And I just thought, I've got to now just set about coming, you know, understanding what this really, really means. And I'm still on that journey, but I feel like, well, that's that morning when I kind of grasped hold of it and thought, yeah, this is it. That day we went to the beach, so with my children and another family, and I hadn't mentioned this to the children because I was literally just sort of like soaking it up as this kind of like, whoa. But it was absolutely incredible because I think I told you at the time, but that whole day, Theo just kept running back to me and giving me these great big cuddles and kisses, which, you know, he's such a sweet, sweet boy, but he's 11 and he doesn't do that so much now. So it was out of the ordinary. And he just kept looking into my eyes and it was like his whole self was just saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, mummy. I just knew it. I just absolutely knew that's what was going on. And we've always had this kind of, kind of mirror thing going on. I think we have it with our kids. And there's only certain times where you can really see it really clearly, isn't it? But it's going on time. And he knew on some level that I'd understood what to do, and that was going to be great for him because I wasn't going to be trying to meet my needs by trying to meet his needs. So now to give him some space to work out what he needed instead of me running around, trying to make everything wonderful. And, instead of operating from this place of here I am, just completely present in myself, exploring who I am and modeling to you guys what that looks like, but without an agenda, and trusting that you also know what you want and need. And I'm just here to, fan those flames and, provide what you can't get for yourselves and ask you, like Akila S. Richards says, she calls it mad ask questions or something. See this like thing of like just ask loads of cool questions to kind of find things out and ask questions of yourself. And I love that. I love that that sort of questioning.
And that's where I think her stuff is, I know it's aimed at homeschoolers, but it actually, it's about finding yourself and finding your place, isn't it? It could really relate to anybody. It is. She's just got a really great way of getting you to recognize what it is that makes you tick. And and where joy fits with that, like question, like, are you joyful? Are you living your best life? Are you content? What are you getting out of life? Which, as you say, from a homeschooling parent where you just start homeschooling and you think, oh, it's all about, I'm going to be the best, do the best for them and forget about yourself. And I think there's so many parents get to that like burnout, because it's definitely, it's not an easy choice, homeschooling. But it can be when you work through the kind of stuff that Lucy's putting out. When you can work through that, it can be the best. But actually it's knowing that it's exploring everything that is there for you to explore. And I think it's like I can only relate to like going into homeschooling and thinking, right, okay, I did the whole school at home thing and sort of felt like that was it. I've done that. I've made my decision. This is how it's going to be. And actually you soon become quite unhappy and quite, and it's just so raw, isn't it? Homeschooling is so raw. It just brings everything out of you. But actually, if you can work through that, and with someone like Lucy and her courses and the things she has on offer, it can really help the whole family kind of get to the space that you're at, so you got to that kind of point where the children are kind of reflecting and picking up on that. And how did that move on? What did that look like?
I think so then that we kind of like, so we started to sort of think about, I remember one evening we were together as a community, and she talked about something like her and her family had been sitting around talking about, one of their intentions for that year was to support one another to self-actualize. And I was like, okay, that's fucking awesome, but I have no idea what self-actualize means. So I went on this total rabbit hole on the internet about what self-actualize is. And it's so funny because it sits at the top of the Maslow's, triangle of need, but it's like the little bit that you never sort of like notice because you like, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is incredible. And I just thought, yeah, it's about fulfillment, right? So I was like, yeah, that's what I want for my family. That is the best kind of like thing to aim for. And it allows sort of self-expression of like your individual desires and needs, and it gives space to all of those. They don't have to be the same, but if we're supporting one another, then that's awesome. So yes, we got to that kind of point, and I just had a real sense. So Bella was 8, Theo's 11. Maybe Bella was like maybe 7.5, and Theo was like, yeah, maybe like 10.5. And I just kind of felt like I'm not enough. I can't give them enough of what they need. Like Bella just seemed to now need just long days of play with her friends, and I'm not her friend. And there weren't enough people around to do that with, and there wasn't a big enough community to kind of like draw upon. And Thea had never really found his group of friends, and I just was like, well, that is okay. Let's just be really honest about that. I can't, I'm not enough, and what they need doesn't exist. And so yeah, like, what are we going to do about it? And at the time, a friend had contacted me and said, I want to do this thing. I want to open up an Agile Learning Centre. And I knew about Agile Learning Centres actually from Lucy's community, where people had mentioned their kids went to Agile Learning Centres a couple of days a week. And I was like, ooh, that sounds so cool. And I think Lucy had said, if there was one near me, I'd want my kids to go. And I was like, okay, it must be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, what is this thing? And so my friend had said, and I was like, oh, wow, that sounds amazing. Like, who are you thinking of? Have you got someone in mind to do that with? Yeah, you. And I was like, oh, okay. And so, yeah, we just sat about this kind of whole adventure of like, wow, as I looked into it, I was like, wow, this could really meet my children's needs, because they both want more stimulation. They both want this kind of like, they just wanted more kind of more realization of their sort of deep inner longings, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed other adults to rub up against and other children to be inspired by and be in community with. That's what they really wanted. And I just thought, well, great, it doesn't exist. Let's make that happen. And hopefully it will draw together lots of people, some of whom I don't know yet. And this could be really the kind of community that we'd really always hoped for when we'd kind of moved here. So yeah, so we just went on a mad mission to make it happen, and then decided actually it was probably better if we did it sort of in our actual local communities.
Yeah.
Which, makes really sense. We've ended up now doing 2 within West Cornwall, which is awesome because there's only one other Agile Learning Centre in the UK. So it's kind of like a radical mission, which I love.
That is cool.
Yeah, so there'll be 3 and 2 will be in West Cornwall. So good old Cornwall is transforming what learning can look like.
The place for creativity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that process and that pilot is taking place. And how did that, do you want to share, like, how did that, so that looks for Bella, that's exciting that she's on that route, and for Theo things have taken a different route, but how share that, if you share how you because obviously I know that story, but
that little chestnut is well, I think again, like all the work that I'd done with Lucy, and also I just So about a year ago, I finished 2 years of pretty intense somatic experiencing therapy, which is like body work, psychotherapy. And so I think that had given me loads of scaffolding I'd never had around sort of trust, really, being able to trust myself and trust life to a certain extent. And I think that was another real revelation, actually, in my early days of unschooling, that, it was all about, well, we need to trust our children.
Yeah.
I can remember having a bit of a revelation. I cannot trust them until I trust myself, and I don't trust myself, which had kind of then unraveled me a little bit. And, having therapy, was just so intensely helpful for that part of that journey. And then that overlapped a little bit with being part of Lucy's community, which actually she has done lots of training in sort of somatic experiencing coaching. So, she's very much about experiencing things in your body, being present to your needs and inner child work and stuff like that. So it was a real beautiful overlap. And so that had given me lots and lots of scaffolding. And Theo is always, I think I've talked about this before in our other podcast, in the other podcasts you've done where we've chatted. Theo's always, I don't know, he's like some little spirit guide, really. He's just like, he's always just, and you'll probably be thinking about this in terms of your kids, because it happens, doesn't it? But he's always ahead, looking over his shoulder saying, come on, over here. And it never looks how I think it's going to look. And it always calls me on and allows me to just expand and trust more and open my heart more and dig really, really deep and really put my money where my mouth is. So if I say my values are around connection and trust and community and consent and all of that stuff, then Theo will be like, oh, really? So if I said I wanted to go to school, how would you feel about that? So that's exactly what he did do. And yeah, so I think I dropped him off somewhere and drove to your house and had a total like, and as I was doing that, I knew with absolute confidence I would come through the other side. And I love that process of like, if something's hard, get it off your chest, say all the really hard things in the company of someone that's going to give you lots of empathy and love and hold that space. And then you will rise up inside you and find what you need for the situation. And so by the time it got to the end of that day, I drove and picked Theo up and was just like, and I was just able to just be like, right, this is my role. It's not fixer. It's not getting all super excited and ruining the project for him. It's just listening, giving him space, and I'm here to support. And that, I was just like, is the same whatever he chose to do. And it just so happens it's school, and hilarious when, he's going into this sort of what I consider to be really oppressive education system, and I'm creating what I perceive to be a very liberation focused learning model. And so I actually think it's pretty cool, really, because it would be really easy for me to just be like, yeah, that system sucks, so we're doing this thing over here. And in a way, it's like, no, you've got to have one foot in that and one foot in here, and remind yourself of what that looks like and what you're doing. And I think it's going to be, so he hasn't started yet, he starts in January. So it's going to be a really, really interesting process. And I'm sure it's happening for exactly the right reasons. And he's really chuffed. And I feel like, I think I was saying this to you the other day, I feel like this is what home educating does, I think. It gives a child a real freedom to have agency and really know who they are and what they need. And certainly Theo's sort of personality is one of being able to generate his own ideas. If he's given the right environment, he knows how to see exactly how to get his needs met from his own agency. And he's looked around, gone, nothing exists. I want companionship. I knows the reality of the education system, but yeah, I'm going to give that a go. And my parents are going to support me to do whatever I want. And it's choice-based. So if it totally sucks, I can just leave. But yeah, this is what I'm doing. This is what I want. Even though it's completely the opposite to what my parents are doing and what they want, I have enough agency to make my own decisions. And I know they're cool with that. And in a way, I'm just like, job done. It's kind of like super cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is the other part of me is like, we visited last week, I think it was, and I was like looking around thinking, fucking hell, you've chosen this over like slightly insulting, but I'm gonna go with rolling with that and stick with the latter kind of reframe.
But I mean, isn't it, it is, I think it's a really beautiful story, because it's that ultimate like trust, and it's that, it's that freedom still, even though he's going into this system that, is completely not free, but in his world, in his family, he's free to do that. And I just, I do think it is a beautiful story. I think we need to come back and see and talk about his experiences and how he's doing on that journey. It would be really fascinating from a homeschooler's point of view, but also from there will be parents. I've interviewed Faith before, who was a homeschooler who never went to school and then went to school, and her experience. And I think you've been talking about not being afraid and being as a parent, being there and trusting them, and that ultimately is what it's about, isn't it? And I think I just it will be fascinating to see his thoughts, and I really hope actually he gets out of it what he wants, because he is desperately looking for that companionship, to have some friends to muck around with. And it isn't easy, particularly when you're slightly older, trying to get into the homeschool community. It seems to be, it's easier, I think, if you're in your early primary phase, or you never went to school and you just kind of carried on in that flow. And certainly even in the last kind of 3 years, homeschooling's grown so much that there is so much more out there. But for him, that didn't happen when he needed it, did it? And his kind of, and so for him, he is, like you say, he is going to, he's got an idea about where and what he can explore, and you're letting him explore. And that, is,
it's very much on his own terms. I mean, he knows that school's not going to be on his own terms, that it's all, there's not really a freedom, but because he's choosing that, it makes it very, very different, which is really fascinating. I am very curious about the whole. I'm watching with absolute curiosity, and there's definitely some discomfort, definitely, but I think the thing that I really learned through therapy is that you can tolerate some discomfort if you're really compassionate and kind to yourself, and you just let it be there and let it pass. And discomfort's not necessarily a bad thing. It leads to new experiences, and as long as there's choice and consent there, and you don't have to kind of put up with some stuff you don't like, then some discomfort's cool. And
I've learned along the road that we can't, as parents, kind of, we want to make everything all right, and we want them to have everything that they want. We want them, but actually sometimes you've got to sort of step back, be there, be present with them, but allow them to, whether school works for him or whether it doesn't work for him, you're going to be there in the same present state with him, and that kind of like allowing them to make and explore those decisions and work out for them what works is only going to make them, far more confident, happy beings. Because they're not suppressed with their thoughts and their ideas. They are free to explore in the safety and support of their small family community where where they're nurtured. They can take those steps, and whether they make mistakes or not, that is kind of their journey. It's their place to kind of for that to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And that's the thing, it's so not outcome focused. It's like, if you, whatever you're doing in this sort of like life that we're leading, this sort of lifelong learner thing, it's like, as long as you're getting something from it, even if it doesn't turn out how you want it to, then it's still really valuable and something you're just going to stash in your little tool belt. And if it's, if you've got that kind of empathy to come back to again, you've got that warmth and empathy and kind of acceptance to come back to, then it's going to be a valuable experience, whatever it is. If he goes and he's like, that sucks, then it means he's going to be able to open up to what is here in a different way. If he goes and he really finds enough there to make him to give him the capacity to tolerate what he doesn't like, then that's so super cool. Like if he finds good friends, and even if he goes and has a few years where he behaves in a way that at some point in the future he thinks, oh, I didn't really like that, then also super valuable, because we've all behaved the opposite of how we want to, and that's been really, in the long run, that's kind of made us who we were. So I don't think there's a kind of I'm just sort of like, I've reframed it, I think, and just sort of thought, if he'd chosen another activity and it wasn't like my bag, I'd just be like supporting him, and I'd be getting him what he needed to be able to do it. And so I'm kind of seeing this as, this is his project. This is project kind of school, and we'll see kind of what goes down.
I think other parents will find that super helpful, because I think God, we weren't necessarily going to talk about the whole government changes, but I think the change to the statutory register and the kind of the recent Portsmouth court case where the parents lost the right to not provide more evidence because the council with the list kind of details that the family had given, it wasn't enough. And I think there are going to be families who are fearful of that kind of expectation, and there's going to be those that think, actually, I don't want to go through that. I would reach out and say, hold your space, it's going to be okay. But actually there will, and for other reasons, the podcast I did with Faith, where she just felt like she should do that. At 14, she wanted to do her GCSEs, and she couldn't see how she was going to do her GCSEs at home, because she thought it would looked like and was a different model. So I think for all those families in all those different situations, whether it's child choice or change in circumstances, I think it's going to be really useful to have heard where you've been with it, and also for us to pick up later on when he's had some experience of it, and how that whole process has been for you and for him.
Yeah, totally. It was so interesting when I went to school, because I'm obviously Theo did go to school for reception in year one, so I'm not far into the school system, and I managed supported accommodation for young people who are homeless. So I definitely have an eye for safeguarding and health and safety and risk assessments and mitigating risk and all that sort of stuff. That's sort of kind of in me, did it for a long time. So I go into a school, and that's, sort of how I'm viewing it. Also as an environment of where my son's going to be. So I went in there with my eyes wide open. And what's really hilarious is I was sort of thinking, you've got these Ofsted inspectors kind of potentially coming into your home with this lens of what's going on here. Is this a suitable education going on here? I'm going to look through this lens, and they get to make that assessment. But there I am in the school looking through my lens going, is this a suitable environment? Is this going to provide my child, not with these outcomes that every single individual child seems to have to meet at a certain point, but I've got a whole other set of outcomes that are that I perceive children require in order to thrive in life and also contribute to a new way of being, because I feel like the way that we've lived for quite a long time now, with its roots in colonialism and patriarchy, is not serving anybody but, this top, what is it, like how many tiny little percentage, basically the richest people. And that's not okay. So in order to create this world that we kind of long for, most people and those that are most oppressed, we need a different set of understanding and skills and ways to be in community with one another and understand how to resolve conflict, how to listen to our own inner wisdom, all the things that school strips away from you. We are doing our best to create pockets in this crazy culture and society that we live in where they aren't stripped away from our children, so that they can stand as they were designed and kind of, reap a new way of being with one another. And that is what I long for. And so it's very interesting for me to think, how's Theo going to be in this environment? Will he go in there and last an hour and just think, fuck this, and say, I'm going home now, and just walk out? Will he sort of think, I'm not sure about this, I feel quite uncomfortable, but those guys over there look like they potentially could be some good friends, so I'm just going to like block that shit out and hold on? I have no idea, and it's a really interesting part of our experience, really. So
it is it's so fascinating. I mean, so many points in that little bit of discussion, particularly around suitable education, and I think it's actually quite exciting. Now is quite exciting, although this ridiculous legislation's potentially going to change, and government have a new agenda on how things should look, or local authorities are going to be doing perhaps more scrutiny in terms of, actually it's a really bloody exciting time, because there are so many people, so many professionals, so many parents, so many teachers talking about how crap this system is, how it doesn't it doesn't give them the skills that they need. Employers, businesses, every single, I don't meet people who say, oh, we've got an amazing education system, and I think that the more the government are pushing this agenda, the more are coming on board. And so, okay, it might seem quite scary and it might, quite fearful, but actually I think let's ride this wave, and let's all just be together with these amazing views, that people have. And it's funny. So we took Finn to see a secondary school, because we felt a bit, so he's got quite a few friends who are schooled and quite a few friends who are homeschooled, and obviously they've all started talking about secondary school, and Finn hasn't. Finn it has kind of no intention of going to school at present, but we kind of felt like, because he hasn't seen that environment, how does he know that he doesn't want to go? So we kind of asked him whether he would like to just go and look, and just, with just to see what it was like, just to be able to make an informed decision. And we went round, and it was in terms of resources, there were loads of fabulous resources there, and stuff, but it was, his insights were so fascinating. So he said, at the end of it, he said, "Cool, Mum, did you see the design and technology, all the woodwork and all the tools?" And we were like, "Yeah." And he was like, "So if I went to school, like, I'd just be able to make all this stuff in there." And we were like, "Well, you are allowed to make stuff, but it's within your timetable. So when you have that lesson, so how many lessons do you get a week?" And it was like, "Well, did the deputy head said that they do art for a block, and then you do D&T, and then you do and so he was like, "Oh, so you can't do it all the time?" And I was like, no, you can't. You have the timetable, and you have to do those lessons within the timetable. We can find out if they do clubs and things, but and obviously if you're interested in woodwork, we can do some of that at home." And then he kind of went quiet, and then he was like, "Did you hear the teacher say that everyone was doing their PE lesson? And did you hear the teacher say that everybody has to do PE? So they're doing rugby, and everyone has to do rugby, and they don't have anyone sitting out, everybody." And he said, "And for football?" And he said, I don't like those. I like karate, and I like surfing, and I don't want to do rugby." And it was just for him, it was a realization that how free he is at home. So it was interesting, but actually there were so many insights going in there. I had my head teacher hat on, and I was just like, who's engaged, who's working, who's there was so much passive stuff going on. But actually my husband, who's not normally that observant, bless him, I would say, he came out and he was like, "Oh my gosh, like there was no room, there was no space in the classrooms, the chairs, trying to fit everyone into these classrooms, there was literally no space to kind of walk around, to be kind of free to move." And he was like, "So they actually have to sit there for that whole time, and some of the lessons are more than an hour." And and that was realization. And then they were talking about the technical stuff and how great it is that they've all got iPads. And it is great in this day and age, but actually when you looked closer, all they were using their iPads for was like a replacement textbook. They had the PowerPoint up there that was sent to them, and they were just following it. It wasn't about being creative and finding things. And so it was really, really interesting. And and just kind of takes me back to Theo, and just whether whether those kind of things will come into play for him, or whether, like you say, he'll have found his groove, he'll have found what he was looking for, and that will be enough.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because from having such a bad experience at school, he needed so much time to really recover and heal from that, really. And then for a long time he needed to sort of heal sort of the lack of consent to the degree we have it now in our own home. And so there was a lot of I'm not up for doing that, and everything was very much like led by his choices, which meant a lot of the time he wasn't doing a lot of the stuff that we kind of felt like he would really enjoy, but we were just like, no, this is more important that he chooses. And then I feel like now he's in a really, really good place, and he really sort of started to open up actually just before the pandemic, and start to kind of be like, yeah, I want to try that, which is really beautiful. And so I feel like this is kind of it's so interesting, because you would think that when a child has this real sense of mutually sort of consensual relationships with their parents, where they know that they get to choose, that they're not going to be pressured or coerced or made to do anything, that we don't have an agenda around his learning and his sort of self-actualization, that they would then choose a certain kind of environment or certain kinds of projects. And it's so interesting that he's chosen probably one of the least choice-based, consent-based environments that he possibly could. I think he must be feeling pretty confident and pretty equipped within himself to know that he has the capacity to manage that, because there's no way I could manage a day in the school. I would go bonkers, being treated like that, being herded around, having to call people sir and miss, and I actually probably would struggle to tolerate half an hour of sitting still and get someone giving me information. So that's really interesting, to be a person that has been given, because as adults we've still got responsibilities. So even if we live in this sort of very unschooling-y way where we're joy-based, we're listening to our own needs, and we're creating a life of freedom, there's still a certain restriction to that. I mean, you can kind of keep working at that till it's less and less and less. But compared to a child, which is quite right, I feel like that's the years where you should have total, So he's this person now that's kind of got this sort of this open heart to the world, and he's like, right, cool, I can go try anything because I'm not really that worried about it. And that's very interesting to me, a person that has a lot of, I'm not going to do that, I don't tolerate that, I won't be going there. I just okay, what would happen if I went to school with an absolutely open mind, with a complete objective? So I don't know, I'm taking a deep dive into something and I perceive I can get that from school. Can I go in there and tolerate the things that I'm not that keen on in order to get the thing that I'm after? That's kind of pretty cool in a way. Yeah.
It is really cool. And, what I love about your story as well is that you've obviously come so far in your journey that you're not, your inner thoughts and your own feelings about how you would feel if you were him going to school, you're not letting them come into play. Because I think that's the other thing that we have to work through as parents, is that we use our own experiences and our own feelings to sort of either protect or guide children in certain directions. And actually it's realizing that they are their own beings, and that and so are we, but what affects us, or what we wanted, or what we like or dislike, they aren't the same for that child, for that being, and letting them have that freedom and space to really go with it is amazing. But it does take some journey to kind of,
I think you've got to be prepared to do that work, haven't you, on yourself? For me, I feel like that's what unschooling is really about. It's like you can't really do it unless you're really prepared to look at the sort of things that come up in you and go, what's that? Let me stand back and let me offer that place some kindness and some space to grieve for the things that are lost, or give it some space for the things it's never explored. There's a lot, it's a lot. And I'm really, really grateful that I was almost sort of forced into having therapy, because it gave me gave me so many tools to sort of for the rest of my life. And, and then again, working with Lucy and then, reading books like Akila S. Richards' book, Raising Free People. It's all these sort of, coming back to practices, ancient practices really, that we've kind of stripped away from us. And that's really wonderful. And also there's a really, when I first started therapy, I was like, I was really going through the mill, and I was really, really worried about my kids. Oh, I can't just be this like, joy on a stick person for them, and how's it going to affect them? And maybe actually Theo needs to come and see you too. I was saying this to my therapist, and he was like, that they'll be okay, they're fine, they're safe, they're going to be good. But actually, I don't think Theo needs to come and see me. I think you need to do the work on you, and he will know.
Yeah.
nervous system is regulated, and when you're okay, he'll go, now mummy's okay, and I can open up and work out how to meet my own needs. And so in a way, Theo, I am okay now, and Theo is doing exactly what my therapist said he would do. It's just not what I thought it would look like. That's okay. So in a way, it's kind of a super celebration too, because it's like, he can trust that I'm good, and I'm okay for him to do brave things. It's not going to flip me out. So that's kind of, it's also, it's so good. It's so good when, and that's where you can't read a book that tells you, when you unschool in your family, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
It's completely based on trust and connection and consent and curiosity and real deep listening. And then something today that I got really reminded of, and I was in a course that Lucy's doing at the moment around reluctant leadership, and she talked about a practice that she does when they have like unschooling camp, that she takes a moment when they start, and she really has a ritual of really seeing people. And I went, today was the first full day of our Agile Learning Centre pilot, and I was just like, that's my practice today, to really, really see each individual person in this community. It was so brilliant. It was so brilliant the way people responded to that. And I'm only at the beginning of this practice, so I'm sure as that kind of evolves, it's going to become even more wonderful. But it makes me realize I just skim the surface all the time. Rely on the things that I know about that person, and even if I'm actively listening and exercising that muscle of empathy, but not really seeing them, so different. It was so beautiful.
And that is really lovely, because we all recognize that life has just become way too hectic, hasn't it? And like you say, in sort of ancient times, that would be part of who they are and how they create their community and how they live. And we've just lost all of that because we're flying from one thing to another, and and dealing with kind of the sort of way that technology has speeded up life even more. And it's it's great that Lucy's kind of doing these things. You mentioned a book there, and I think it would be great for listeners. We'll create a little list of the kind of things that you've been reading and going through recently, and then shall we touch base, do you think? We'll see. Shall we touch base when Theo's gone back to school? I'd love to do a podcast with him. I keep saying that.
Oh God, that'd be amazing.
I would really love to do that. He would be fab
person, definitely. He's not one that just repeats what's going on around. He has his own.
No,
he surprises me all the time, all the time. Like we thought, one of the things that we were talking about a flow state. So I've recently just done Sophie Christopher's consent-based education course. It's like an 8-week or 12, anyway, it was a few weeks course, and that was so interesting. And we were talking about flow state, and I was chatting away with Theo when we were going for a walk somewhere, and he was like, oh, he's so interested. He was like, oh, and he was, I'm not sure, I've been in flow state recently. And I said, oh, okay, what about like when you're gaming and you've got a new game and you just want to kind of like beat the game and get to the challenge and over, and he's like, nah, and I was like, what? Nah. And I was like, okay. I was so shocked, because we'd made the assumption that gaming was like one of his, one of the loves of his life, that he loved it. And he was like, nah, that's just sort of filling in the time, really. Like, okay, which made me to do this asking loads of sort of questions, really, because I was just like, oh my God, you just can't make assumptions based on little things. And he sort of was just telling me some of the stuff that he's really has lit him up recently. And I was just like, I would not have.
And do you think that's really interesting? Because, like, you know, kind of in the unschooling sort of ethos of like letting children, you know, make decisions. And do you think, you know, obviously that's a great thing to do, but in terms of like offerings, like, do you think it's important as well to be sort of offering these things that, because you potentially could be just making these assumptions that, oh, they're happy just doing that all day, I'll just let them carry on doing that. Do you think how
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. That's what I love about the ALC model, and seeing all the kids buzzing off this stuff today, and seeing kids that had kind of because the children in the community offer things to the community too. So when we set the day, at the beginning of the day, they say, oh, I'm going to be doing an art session in the kitchen for an hour, and I've worked out this cool way to make boxes and decorate them if anyone wants to come. Or I'm going to be, I want to go down to the beach to do some rock crawling or whatever. And then it doesn't look, you know, someone might say, I'm going to make a film, and then there might be a bit more interest. And then, but as today, as a group of them, it started out just two of them doing Dungeons and Dragons. And my co-facilitator was just chatting away with them, and suddenly, you know, another child was like, ooh, that's super cool. And then another one was like, and it became like this beautiful thing that was generated, and none of them had the idea themselves. That was with no agenda, opt in, opt out, but it was just happened to be something that just lit them up.
Yeah.
And you just don't know what is going to, like, the other thing that we do in the ALC is that facilitators both set an intention for themselves for that day. So mine today, I'd seen this beautiful painting by Jay Souza at the Tate at the weekend, an oil painting where it looked like they'd used their fingers to make a sort of a portrait in the oil plate. It was just all black, and I was like, ooh, totally want to try that. I haven't used oil paint before, and I was like, amazing, that's going to be my thing for the ALC today. So I said, I'm going to be doing this at 11. No, you don't have to come at all, but I'll be doing it. And it was a real sort of, really had to exercise that kind of right and value for myself to carry on doing it, even though no one else wanted to do it. I was like, no, I'm also super valuable here.
Yeah.
And my intentions are super valuable. And actually, the most they're going to get is by us modeling stuff, not telling them. And so as I did it, I was just like, this is incredible. What I was getting from that wasn't about the painting thing really, but it was honoring my time, valuing my intention, and just not really caring who came and who didn't. And you know, and no one did come, and that was absolutely cool. But at the end, people were coming to have a look and were asking me about it, which was beautiful, because who knows what that might spark.
Yeah.
And also it gives them permission to sort of, you know, do something that maybe other people aren't interested in, but they go, well, I still really about. So that is completely appropriate for where Bella's at. So she's 8, and all the other children that are there today. But that, you know, that is something that we did do with Theo over the years. And it was always no. And it was very hard, because I just kept thinking, I'm not doing this right. Like, I didn't have people to look around that were further along the line and think, what could this look like? What am I missing here? You know, you're new to this. So like my mad questioning of myself all the time is, what am I missing? What could I be doing better? You know, la, 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 la. But I think looking back, and obviously I can't be certain about this, is, you know, he was going through a healing process from the school. He was also going through a healing process around, you know, our sort of parenting, that before we'd known about all this stuff we know now. So by the time Bella was 2, we'd kind of like radically aligned with our values. I think our parenting had aligned with our values rather than based on the parenting we received and stuff. But by the time Bella was 2, he was obviously like 5. So he'd had 5 years of us, you know, working shit out and getting it much, you know. So he was healing from that. He was healing from school, bullying, the institution, and also us, you know, working out how to do this homeschooling thing.
And you moved as well, didn't you? You moved from London to, and it was big,
massive for him. We didn't understand about consent stuff at the time, so we were just like, "Oh, it's a great big adventure." And he was like, "I really don't want to move." We were like, "It's going to be great," and so
you'll be all right.
Yeah, it was such a great adventure, and he didn't have any chance to grieve or voice that stuff. I'm not saying we wouldn't have moved, but we would have done it in a very different way. We would have given him a lot of space to grieve and stuff. And he's done a lot more of that actually over the last year, since he's opened up and trusted us with his feelings around that, which has been amazing. And we've, you know, to the point where we were saying, you know, we can move. If you're not happy in this house that we chose without you, we could shift to a house where we all choose that together as a family. Now we understand that's the way we want to live. That was kind of radically healing for him. So he had all of that stuff, and then he had me, like, going through 2 years of really intense weekly therapy where I really came undone. You know, I was looking at really hard stuff around sort of, you know, childhood trauma and, you know, surviving sort of really intense trauma, and you know, he's a really sensitive guy, so he had that too, and he was not open or in any place to take up any offering. And I think that's something really understood now, that there has to be, each child needs a different thing to be able to open. And for Thea, I think I've taken a lot of this from, actually, I got into human design for a while and got his birth chart done. And it was beautiful, actually, because it gave me some real tips, because I was struggling at the time, thinking his brain operates so differently from mine. I don't know how to do this. And it gave me some real, I thought, whether it's like true or not, it gave me some really great stuff. And actually, you know, I found it super helpful. And what it pointed out in his chart, actually his environment is so important to him. Aesthetics, tidy, organized, belonging and extended family are really important to him. And as I read it, I realized that we'd stripped this kind of stuff away from him. His extended family, we'd moved to, you know, like the furthest away we could, other than going to a different country. The house was, you know, is a sort of a project. Plus, Paul and I both have ADHD. And I was going through this huge mental health, like emotional health project. The house was not in a good state, is all I can say. And so that wasn't a good environment for him. And so, you know, he was doing his best to, in a way, kind of slightly incubate and kind of, and nurture and keep himself okay. And then, you know, now he's opening and saying yes. And actually, he did come to the ALC starter session, which I was really super surprised about, because, you know, he's always been a hard no to that kind of thing. And so, so that question, your question about offerings, yes, but I think we have to go back to almost like that Maslow's pyramid of needs, really. It's like, you know, in order to be in a place where we can open and take those offerings, if we're not being coerced, and if we're not being pressured, and if we're not doing it out of fear, if it's really coming from a genuinely, I want to do this place, then there needs to be other things there too. You need to have a sense of, I am safe. My environment is stable, and, you know, I've got my basic needs met. And that's not just like your food, shelter. It's just like the Theo, that needed to be a few really subtle things. Like, my mum is okay. Her nervous system is really solid. And she's going to be okay. And now I can be okay. Yeah.
And that's kind of what made me so mad, you know, going back to government. But, you know, during that whole COVID period, when they sort of slated the fact that children children hadn't done any learning, or they were behind where they should be. I mean, God knows how they even came up with those measures. But actually, what we're talking about is if children are going through any kind of trauma or fear or stuff in their life isn't, they're not going to grasp, or they're not going to take offerings. They're not going to be fully immersed in stuff. And, and I think as a society, we need to get over that like idea that stuff needs to happen all the time. Yeah. And that actually for us as human beings, it's like it's highs and lows, isn't it? And it's and that's okay, and that's normal, and that's but it's about listening to our body, it's about accepting it, and it's about going with it, and like you saying, Theo had those offerings, he wasn't taking them, but actually on reflection, look at what he was going through. And I think we need to do, I think the homeschool community do that in general. But I think actually I spoke to a mum on the phone a couple of weeks ago who had a secondary age child, and she was going through huge trauma and wasn't turning up at school and all sorts of things. And she'd been passed on to me by a friend of a friend, and she was just asking for advice. And I was just like, look, you just need to take every moment and just and try and find the joy in the moment, and get to that place where you're living in a happy space. Because when you're in that space, then you can move on and explore. And like it's I feel really passionate about this, because I feel like the next generation have been through so much, and we need to honor that. And that's why it's sad that it's not recognized by government, really.
But it doesn't fit within their capitalist model, like get everybody through the school system and into the workforce, does it? No. Bullshit. You're actually nurturing people that are going to think for themselves, that aren't going to comply with government and vote for us, and are going to come up with their own ways of doing things. That's definitely not what they want, and they're not stupid. They know that. But
then sometimes I wonder if they are, because they are not creating, these children are not getting core skills. 60% of children getting a good grade in GCSE English and maths, that is not a suitable education, is it? They
don't need maths and education. What they want is compliant children. Yeah. They want people who are like, they don't question, they do what they're told. And even if they can just manage to squeeze 40% out of that school system, to be compliant and do what they're told and be productive and not understand about rest and listening to their own intuition and wisdom, then that's great. That will keep the capitalist wheel turning, won't it? And even though there's this whole, like Sophie talked about this on her course, like there's this whole, we can feel it, can't we, that this shift to a new education paradigm, the old one is going to cling on tightly. And that's what it feels like is happening right now. It's clinging on, because if they genuinely wanted a super cool education system that really worked really well and was really healthy and nurturing and nourishing for children, then what they'd be doing now is going, 34% rise in home education across the nation. What's going on there? Let's have a look at our education system and how to make it better. Instead of going, shit, how do we stop those people taking the people away from the education system? And even asking the ones that have left, why do you want to leave? Because it's not because of the pandemic, it's because people had their kids at home and everything they were afraid of, they realized wasn't that bad. And they suddenly saw their children were happier and the problems lessened and their connection increased, and they had much more emotionally healthy children.
And they understood what the school curriculum looks like, and they're like, oh my God, we can do this, or we can do this better, really.
This just makes no sense at all. And there's a lot, that my children get into that is fantastic. And so they've got no intention of they don't care about the children, do they?
No.
That's not the point of this. It's about control and productivity and everything the home educating world doesn't care about, basically. And why it's frightening, because they can see it's growing in power, and that's a good thing, isn't it? Because it's like,
yeah, isn't it just?
Yeah, that this is and like you say, we've got some flipping, really respectable, credible. I mean, it shouldn't be down to that, but people who've been through the education system, like yourself, that is the most credible person to say that system is failing. Somebody that was really successful within the education system and did an absolute, tried their hardest to make it work, and really did make a difference in children's life, and that, held tightly to their values and their vocation, and were like, there's no way this can work within this blueprint. You're really credible, aren't you? Because although I'm saying the same thing, in their eyes, I'm just a mother, aren't I? That just kept maybe a bit helicoptery, care too much about my kids, and I don't know what I'm talking about. So it's fantastic that there's people, there's educators, there's professors, there's
authors, there's all scientists, there's the whole range of people.
You can't deny that, can they? No. And it's sad that's more credible than the mothers of their own children. And that's the thing that makes me feel the most, I mean, I was livid the other night, wasn't I? It makes me the most angry that they're trying to take away the rights of our children, but also the human right to know and choose what's best for your child. That is so outrageous. And it just shows that, how privileged our society is, really, because that's happening in other countries all the time, and within our own society. If you're a family of color, if you're women of color, if you've got neurodiversity, it's like with the Portsmouth home educators, a lot of people were like, oh, so shocked at that, about the justice system. And I was like, I'm shocked about a racist justice system that has been cruelly taking away the dignity of, Black and people of color for how many years now. And now, now we're saying it's shocking. Now it's actually having an effect on, white families. Then, that's a shock, isn't it? No, it's the same justice system. It's just extending its power into a different realm, So, it's just showing its true colours, isn't it? Basically,
it is. But I do like that vision of us all on this wave, and just, we're riding it, but the wave is rising, with all these people that are joining, and and just that vision that it will look different in the future. We're in that kind of, we're in that change, aren't we? We're the ones that are taking the blunt of it, but we're going to move things forward, and we're going to make things different for the next generation.
I'm so grateful for the pioneers, really, that have been, sometimes I feel quite radical and countercultural, but there's people that have been doing this stuff years and for years, basically. And I can't think of their names now, but even people that have gone before us that, in our lifetime, Sophie Christopher, Lucy Atkin-Reeds, all these people that have been, leading big movements and really saying stuff to people that for a long time were like, what are you talking about? And now that's become more normalized. And
actually, even as far back like 80, 100 years ago, people were writing books about this stuff. It's just that now we're gradually building up a bigger group, a bit more power to that research, really. I
find it so interesting because in America, you've got America as like, it's one of the craziest, mad as oppressed, messed up places, but out of that has been born the most incredible, like, visionary people that have risen up against that and created these most incredible movements and projects. It's almost like out of that, it's like when colonialism and patriarchy and capitalism rise and they're really holding on, it's like the response to that is just incredible, and the things that people go through in order to stand for those rights. I mean, you know, it's incredible, and it's strange to be part of kind of something that is echoing that now ourselves. And you know, as we open the ALC, I'm like, wow, you know, we are literally creating this new paradigm. We're opening this kind of other way that's open for other people. And it's not going to be liked much by you know, the government, is it? But
no.
yeah.
Well, no.
But we can I think it's really important. I was thinking about this the other day, how, you know, we can also start to become really othering of things. And I think as well, I feel like part of our role is to normalize things rather than we become these kind of like crusty, hippie, alternative sort of parents who are doing something sort of really alternative and radical, and like normal people, inverted commas, sort of say, well, good on you, but I could never do that. It's like, what language are we using just to make it really normal? You know, like, I don't need to look normal, but am I creating bridges, you know, because I don't want to be othering other mothers that choose to use the education system, because I don't want to be this judgmental person that's like, I can't believe you send your kids to school, because I don't feel like that.
Yeah, no,
So
likewise.
how do I create bridges with people so that they are also fighting our corner, instead of like, when it comes to the crunch, they go, oh yeah, I've always thought that was a bit dodgy, those home educating families, you know. It's like, how are we normalizing what we're doing? What language are we using that other people can kind of relate to? And I think the pandemic did give a window into that.
It did, definitely. It did. It gave people a chance to not only experience what it's like to have their children at home 24/7, but also to experience what their children are expected to do. You know, I think it really did give them a view into, I mean, it's tricky to, you know, it's not a comparison because they were ultimately trying to school their children at home whilst trying to work at the same time. And that is totally not what homeschooling is like. But yeah, it did help to normalize kind of
the emotional health of their children, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Obviously not everyone, because for some people it, you know, it must have been really, really hard to juggle all that stuff when you know, you're in life. But there was a portion of people where they could see, you know, that their children's lives were richer. And
I think of those parents that were like, I can't cope with my children at home all the time, we're getting back to school, I think there are still a large proportion of those parents that were like, you know, couldn't see how life could change in terms of work and family dynamics to cope in that situation. But they have a lot more empathy for their children, for what they experience at school, what kind of, you know, how dry learning is, and how, you know, there were so many parents talking about, you know, fronted adverbials, who the hell uses them, you know. So I do think that was good for that kind of thing. And I think, you know, with homeschooling rising, it can only, the language and the whole everything about it can only become more and more normalized.
Yeah. And I mean, the crazy thing is like, you know, as a parent with kind of loads of like desire for space and projects and diving in deep to stuff, I would love it if my kids were super happy and nourished in community for 5 days a week from like 10 till say 3, loving their lives, doing their thing that made them light up, and they're, you know, exploring their passions with other kids in a really safe and trust-filled environment where they were respected and it was mutually consensual. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But I think that's the thing, like, none of us, I don't think people are generally saying, you know, I don't want to even use the word school, because that, but none people, like, you know, I'm not adverse to school, like in terms of a place where my children go. It's just that the system is too rigid, is too, there's not enough flexibility and not enough choice, and it's too didactic. The adults are so far above the children that they can't bring themselves to talk at the same level. And children notice that. The ones I've interviewed are like, it's weird going to college. Suddenly, the minute I'm at college, everyone talks to me like like I'm the same as them. Why can't they do that when I'm at secondary school or primary school? Or why do we have to? So I don't think people are against that. It's just the system and the setup, really.
It's like it hasn't evolved. In fact, what it's done is kind of like almost jump back to sort of like another era. Like,
well, actually, it's even since I left 5 years ago, and I in the 9 years that I was ahead, it dived so much. I had 3 Ofsted inspections, and each one of those was totally different, but each one of them got gradually more data driven, to the point where the last inspection, they don't even want to see the children. I was supposed to be on the Isles of Scilly with my school, and they were like, that's okay. I was like, well, you won't be able to talk to me if I'm in the Isles of Scilly, because blah, blah, blah. And they were like, that's okay, we just want to look at the data, look at a few books, and that difference from the first inspection, where the inspectors came in and just went, oh, I can just feel she could feel it, she could see, it was real.
That's so interesting, because when they showed us around the senior school, I wanted to look in the classrooms and see the kids' faces.
Yeah.
It tells you what's going on. I wanted to see their body language. I wanted to see how they were interacting, how the teacher was looking, and just the general feel of the class. And that was not something they particularly wanted me to see.
That's so interesting. So I had the opposite, where they opened the doors, but we had the deputy head, and you could see the children look up, and it was like all of a sudden shirts were being tucked in, and it was it was hilarious to kind of witness that. But it is crazy. It is crazy. I have to zoom off and do and vacate the children's bedroom, because I'm hiding in the bedroom. But I think we should carry on this conversation, and either whatever comes first, either when your pilot's finished and you're getting into setting up mode of your Agile Learning Centre, which I'm so excited about, or as Theo starts school and just sharing some of that, or
I think the two things coincide, so I think that'll be beautiful. The pilot will finish, which will give us lots to talk about, and he starts school, so like mid-Jan would be I'm really curious, like I have no idea, so it's going to be a good convo, I reckon.
I'm grateful to be a fly on the wall, really, because like you say, it's
You're
from
more
a
than
sort
a fly on the wall. You're my kind of
but yeah, so we'll put some of those resources that you've mentioned below, and we will let you know when we're about to do another podcast. And in the meantime, if you've got any questions that you want to ask Essie about anything that we've talked about, I know that she would be really happy to answer those, and we can either record those as a live kind of question and answer, or we can put together a post or a blog or something and answer those questions. So do send them in to me, hello@collageapp.co.uk. And until January, I don't want to say have a great Christmas, because but it's creeping up on us, isn't it? But yeah, until then, keep calm and keep cozy, and enjoy the ride.
Nice.